And welcome to Crafty Chat. I'm Heidi, and I am joined by, again, I can't get it out. I'm joined by Lucy and Nancy, as I normally am, and also Amy. Amy is going to suffer through our antics today.
Our blunders. It's a Monday.
It is the solstice, the winter solstice, which is very exciting. And it's super exciting because we have Amy here who does astrophotography. I hope I'm calling it the correct thing. And There's like a really cool conjunction happening right now with Saturn and Jupiter. And so astronomy is wild and great. And so welcome, Amy.
And that's probably why the technology is weird too. Yeah.
That probably is.
Everything's surprised.
Yeah. So where should we begin? I guess, I guess I have a lot of questions. So I'm just going to dive in and say, how long have you been studying photography? And especially like getting into the nighttime photography?
Well, that's a good question. And it's one of the reasons I sort of feel a little bit like a fraud here, you guys, because really like since August, that's it.
That's amazing.
I mean, I've taken photography classes in the past and all of that, but the night stuff is completely different. You still have to kind of care about framing and that kind of thing. But, it's only been a few months. So I don't know. I don't know what kind of counts as skill and craft or whatever. But to me, it was like the whole thing was, oh, this isn't so hard to do. This is just a few, get a few settings right and anybody can catch stars in their photo. And that was sort of my motive for even doing it and sharing it, is that it's kind of easy.
Well, yeah. And then also we should mention that you have a couple of programs on AADL TV. And I did enjoy them because they did seem very direct. As long as you don't mind being up really late at night and out in the potential cold, unless it's summer. So, which actually was another question I did have. I was wondering, I guess you haven't done it long enough maybe to know for sure, or maybe just your study of astronomy. You've been, I assume, studying astronomy for longer than because you seem to know a lot. So, are the skies like clearer, better defined when the air is cold as opposed to the summertime heat? Or does it matter?
Well, boy, that's a good question. It really can depend. Like the problem with shooting it in the cold is that your lens can get foggy, it can get dewy. And so there's a whole bunch of issues associated with that. So I wouldn't say it's easier to get a shot in the cold, but I don't know. I mean, I've been taking photos since August, and there were, it was easier then, let's face it, because you could stay out longer, and it's just, I didn't have as many issues with the fog or the cold or any of that. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't really know enough. I mean, I'm really new at this, and a lot of it is, I'm part of the University Lowbrow Astronomers group, the group that brought the telescopes to the library. And so, a lot of the people in that group know a lot more than I do. And several of them are deep sky photographers, astrophotographers. And that's also like an entire tier of different, of work and gear and know-how. It really is. So this is just going outside and actually opening up your shutter enough to get stars in your photo. And then what? Then you can do whatever you want with it after that. But yeah, so I don't know. I'm really new at it, actually. So thank you for liking the video and everything. But that was the idea. It's just, hey, this isn't really that bad. You can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was, my dad went on a trip with his sisters to, they were in the Yukon Territory in January, because they wanted to go see the Northern Lights. So they were there over the weekend, and that was his big thing before he went, was figuring out how he could adapt his digital cameras to be able to shoot photo and video of the Northern Lights. And that was a several night process of trying to figure that out with his digital camera. And I was surprised at how much it was easier than I expected. He and I have done some amateur photography from when I was very young, and I competed in Science Olympiad when I was in middle school and high school, and the two events that I did were rocks and minerals and astronomy. So that was, I competed in astronomy competitions for many years, and they were always held in the winter, so the winter sky is my favorite. I know the constellations the most, and it's easiest for me to get my bearings. And that I always wanted to try to do photography of the night sky. So having those videos pop up on AADL TV was really exciting to me, of like, this is finally accessible now. Because you're talking about using your smartphone to do astrophotography, which that kind of blows my mind a little bit. I did not expect that would be doable with
I don't even, there are some apps that help you with that, but I actually use my DSLR most of the time. I tried last night with the conjunction to get a couple of photographs with my phone, my smartphone, but and I will, like, I have a telescope. It's an 8-inch Dobsonian telescope, so it's kind of big. The tube is about this big around, and it's kind of cumbersome to carry around. But I often take it in the backyard, and you can hold up a smartphone like to the lens, and or to the eyepiece, and you can get sometimes a decent photo. It's tricky. But so did your dad get good photos? Did he get some of the Northern Lights? That's a bucket list item for me.
He did get some good pictures. Some of them were more grainy than others. His sisters had iPhones, and they were oddly enough able to get better pictures on their iPhone than he was with his DSLR, with his just normal like pocket little tiny digital camera. So I was blanking on the term there.
Right.
But he made this whole almost like a telescope to attach it to, that was mirrored on the inside, with the idea of like, this is supposed to control the amount of light that comes in. It'll catch more light so that it's, there's more light coming into the lens to get a better picture. And he did have a good amount of luck. The thing that he had the most luck was when we had the solar eclipse 3 years ago here in Michigan. He had a lot more luck adapting his digital camera to catch the solar eclipse than he did with the Northern Lights. But that's also, there's plenty of light, and it's the problem of making sure that there's not too much light coming through.
I think the thing with the Northern Lights is you want, somebody was writing about that recently. I think it's like you want less seconds. You want just like 8 seconds or something, because otherwise it'll all wash out into this kind of just nebulous blur, and you don't want that. You want to see the curtains of light. And so it's easy to overdo that, I think. And so maybe an iPhone is better in that case, or easier than you would think. But
because I think at the time because iPhones for cell phone cameras have been top of their field for many, many years. And there's a lot more cameras now in phones that are as good or better than the iPhone cameras. So the availability of those kind of cameras is starting to level out just a little bit.
It is. I think the big issue is they can't always turn all those functions into manual functions. It's so good, but it's automatic. And but I think pretty soon here it's going to be a lot easier to get photos of the night sky, just way easier. There's apps galore, and there are people making post-processing tools that make it way simpler. It's going to change.
And that's what's really exciting to me, because I've always loved space and the night sky. And it's, being able to capture that, it always seemed so far out of reach. I went to great lengths 2 years ago to plan a trip to the UP with my partner so that we could go to the Upper Peninsula on a night that it would not be cloudy, on a new moon, so that he could see the Milky Way.
Yep.
That was like, no, it was cloudy the whole weekend.
Oh, no.
It rained the whole weekend. I was so mad. I was like, I planned this trip for 4 months, and now it's like a total fluke. So it was kind of, all that time got a little blown. We still had a great time, but that was the main thing that I wanted to do on that trip didn't happen because it just was too cloudy. So.
And that is the big thing right there with nighttime photography. It's a pain. There's a lot of, well, if and hoping. There's if you have clear skies, if, and it's just, there's waiting and waiting and waiting. And you got to want to. I mean, you got to want to be outside and at night and not mind the cold and kind of not be afraid of whatever else is in the dark,
Yeah.
It was legitimately spooky the first time. So I did a lot of stargazing and a lot of astronomy at night when I was in middle school and high school for, studying for competitions.
Right.
But the first time that we actually went stargazing, my dad and I, when I was an adult, when we were in the Upper Peninsula before the trip that I wanted to take with my partner, it was so scary driving down these dirt roads in the middle of nowhere. There hasn't been a paved road for 45, 50 miles up there. We're like literally in the middle of nowhere. And we're driving this Jeep and it's just the cloud of the headlights. That's it. And everything else outside of it is pitch black. It's an experience I encourage everybody to have at least once to kind of really get that idea of like how dark it can get without man-made lights. I get really spooked of how much light pollution there is and how much I don't realize that the light pollution is a problem until I get into the UP and have those experiences of like, it's legit. Like, I understand why there's that fear of the dark is still so prevalent for a lot of folks.
I have a great story. Last summer, August. So it would have been the end of, September. We were up north. We have a small little place up in Manistee National Forest, which is really pretty dark for the lower peninsula. And I wanted to go into the Pine River Corridor, which is really a pretty dark sky area. Dragged my son with me. He's 16. And we just hiked in a little ways to a camp spot that we had been in a few years back. And I set up and I was taking some photographs of the sky. And we were joking with each other, trying to be kind of quiet, even though there was nobody around. And he was joking and singing a little song. And all of a sudden we heard this blood curdling scream. And it sounded almost human, but not quite. And I mean, the hair on the back of my neck, it was in the dark. There was no moon. We couldn't see a thing. And we were in the woods on a path. And we just looked at each other and it was just, we had to get out of there. And I grabbed everything. We started walking and laughing and nervously, and finally got out of there. And I spent the next day a couple of hours just trying to figure out what the sound was. And we think it was a red fox scream. Have you ever heard that?
Yeah, I was going to say it's either a red fox or I've heard raccoons make those kind of noises and just like
crazy. But now it was one of the best memories, right? You made it out alive and so I mean that's part of the allure for me, really.
If any of our regular viewers have never heard the sounds that foxes make, please YouTube that. It's insane.
It's insane.
There's these calls that they make that they sound like a broken engine. And then they'll scream like a toddler. And it's just like, I can't believe that's, I don't know. It was the first time I heard it.
Woods in the dark.
Yeah. It is scary. Yeah.
So I wanted to bump over to looking at some of the photos that you sent me that we can show like what is the work that you do. So I'm going to move slowly to doing that because it always takes us a moment.
It'll give me time to adjust the brightness on my lights because I'm...
Oh, I think I did it pretty quickly. So one of my questions was going to be, though, while you guys were talking about darkness, and it's like, how far out of Ann Arbor do you have to go to start to get, like, to be able to do something like this?
Okay, I will tell you a couple of things about this photo.
Okay.
This was like the second one I really ever took, and it's the first one of the Milky Way. And this is considered not very good skill in terms of, you see how the Milky Way is over there at the right. I didn't really pull out, they call it, doing some post-processing to pull out and make the Milky Way pop a little bit. I had a friend show me how to do that, and I've got a different photo, which I can give you, I'll send you as well so you can compare them. But this was,
no,
that's
a
different one. That was another night. And it's also, but this was about 15 minutes southwest of Ann Arbor. And I just pulled over on a dirt road and stood in a farmer's field completely, trespassing and set up my camera, and it was plenty dark, 15 to 20 minutes southwest of Ann Arbor.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And if you think about it, I'm facing south there. So Adrian would be maybe off in that direction, but quite a ways away. And then you don't have the light from Ann Arbor or Chelsea because they're in the other direction. So that's good.
Yeah. So this is the one that was 1 month later. So
No, actually, yeah, no, that one was actually like the same day, the same weekend. But that's facing north, and there were clouds, as you can see. And that's at the Lake Hudson Recreation Area, which is a dark sky area about an hour away from here. Okay. So, it's not much darker. And if you have clouds and you still have, a little bit of glow on the horizon.
Okay.
Again, that is
the one I was supposed to start with, I think.
This is my fail. Yeah, this is my great fail.
That was the fail. And then the other one was
the fail that made me super frustrated, because that's Comet Neowise. I didn't frame it right. I didn't get any stars. The few stars I did get were bloated and out of focus. I didn't know what I was doing. And everybody else was getting these great shots of the comet with beautiful starry skies in the back. And I'm like, what do I gotta learn?
Do you think it was too early in the night?
Nope.
Like the sun hadn't fully set, maybe? And I mean, there's a lot of
things. It's totally not knowing what I was doing.
Okay.
But I mean, times with comets, the time that they're in the sky is really only like an hour, maybe.
Let's see.
I'm not really sure. I can't remember.
With this one, it was in for a while. Yeah, but and eventually it would move out of range. And this was at the end of its journey here. It was not a couple weeks earlier, I had been up north in the dark area, and I would have had a great photo if I'd known what I was doing, but I didn't even have gear with me. I didn't know to do it. But yeah, this is what made me realize, okay, I need to watch some videos and learn how to do this and talk to people who do know.
So that's like one of your, because I'm going to start to dip into your motivations, because you had a few different things that are like what motivates you, and it's like failure motivation. And I love like these terms. It's like the failure is what motivated you to keep learning and keep going, and instead of giving up. So
yeah, and I have a couple of people in the Lowbrow Astronomers who've been kind enough to. I would send them this photo and say, "What did I do?" And they would say, "Well, it sounds like you did this or that or the other," and that really helps get you to that next step. And then you watch videos and move on to learning whatever you're doing wrong.
So I'm going to move on now to this amazing, like,
oh wow!
I can't believe I know you.
I know. I want to guess, is that the Andromeda Galaxy?
Yeah, and that is like, okay, so. I'm proud of it because it's my first photo of the Andromeda Galaxy, but honestly, there's a million things wrong with this. I won't tell you what's terribly wrong, but so this one, because I don't have a tracking mount yet, and I don't have the thing that would follow the sky and allow you to hold the shutter open as it's following the movement of the sky. I don't have that. So you have to calculate, well, how many seconds can I leave it open? And I think for this, it was like 2.5 or 3 seconds. And that was it. This is where I was. I calculated this through some various websites that tell you how to do this. But I had watched a video, and this one really great YouTuber talks about how you can get deep sky objects with just your camera, but you have to take lots and lots of photos. I mean, I literally stood out there and took 700 shots at 3 second exposure. And I had to after a while, I had to reposition the camera because, it was slowly moving out of range. And then I have to reposition every couple hundred photos. But the trouble is, then you have to use this software to stack them. You have to take dark frames, you have to take light frames, you have to do all this stuff. And then you take all of those photos and you use this software to stack them together, or you can do it in Photoshop. I don't really know how to do it in Photoshop. But it rejected a bunch of them. So this didn't get all 700. It probably took about 300. And there are various reasons that rejected them, it's because I wasn't using a tracker and I had to keep repositioning it. And I sometimes refocused when I repositioned and blah, blah, blah. But that's an example of about 300 photographs plus some dark frames where you just put your lens cap over the camera. You take a bunch of photographs and you stack them all together. And then you have to, in Photoshop, you have to try to help bring out the image because you don't get really much from your final stacked image. You have to pull out the content.
I think that's something that folks don't realize a lot with astrophotography for especially deep space objects is all of the images that you see of deep space objects, they're all composite images. They're all either multiple shots that are all layered on top of one another, or
Right.
they're manipulated in such a way where you're getting a combination of like infrared, gamma, and visible light to give those color gradations. And that has to do with the reason why they have to do that is light only travels a certain distance depending on the type of light that it is. So what we see with the naked eye is not all of the light that's getting to you from that specific object. It's
Right.
It's much more complicated than just simply taking a picture.
It is. And a lot of people will modify their cameras for objects like this. I didn't do that. Mine was just my regular camera and it ended up kind of purpley and I'm not sure I knew how to depurple it. You know, I'm still working on all of that post-processing stuff.
The depurpling. That's
I like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, and I know you touched on when we were kind of chatting over email, you know, like the whole process versus outcome thing. So, which we bring up a lot here because a lot of, and we're happy to talk about it all the time because even when I feel like sometimes I shouldn't say for me, sometimes I have an outcome in mind and that outcome doesn't often happen or I get distracted from the project or whatever. So it turns into being more process, even when I intended outcome. So.
My favorite thing about taking photographs, and I wasn't expecting this at all, is that because you're out late at night and you're taking zillions of photographs and it's in the dark, you don't really see very well what you've got until the next day. Because, you know, unless you're just a fanatic and you got to come home and look at everything you did. But usually you're exhausted, you come home, you sleep, and then you see what you got the next day. And a lot of times there's a surprise in there. Like, oh, look, I mean, I didn't think I had gotten a meteor in either of those photographs. I was completely surprised the next day. So it's the joy of oh man, I suffered last night and I didn't even know what I had. And look, you know, I did all the right things that would help me catch a meteor, but I didn't know I actually had one. And that's the best part for me.
Earning it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It honestly sounds more like traditional develop your own film photography, where you really you don't have a whole lot of an idea of exactly what you got in that picture. I feel spoiled by digital cameras. I found a wind and shoot film camera in one of my boxes a couple of weeks ago. I was like, oh God, I remember those days of taking those to camp and having those and then like getting them back and be like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. They all look terrible.
Yeah, it was because then I loved your question though. You said, how much does the unexpected factor into your crafting?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So how much does it?
Yeah. Who wants to answer that? I mean, I can say as a potter, it definitely, because, you know, you never knew what was going to happen in the kiln, but I don't do that as much anymore. But so that was kind of nerve wracking because it could be one of those things. You had one of those marathon sessions where you're like, I did all this stuff. And then like 3 weeks later, it melted or somebody else's piece blew up in the kiln and your stuff's like, doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Oh my God.
So that's unexpected. Of course, that's unexpected and you don't really get a good result. Sometimes there was happy accidents too, though. So I don't know.
Yeah, I'm working with the unexpected. Like, I mean, mostly I knit a lot. So I feel like I would know what the outcome was based on the pattern I'm reading and what I see. But then as we've talked about, if it's something that's unfamiliar, you know, that I'm learning a new technique or I make mistakes, the outcome might be unexpected. And what I'm working on with myself is to be like, okay, that didn't turn out the way I wanted to, but what did I learn from it? Like, what am I going to make next? So I think it's cool that you have this thing you're doing where the unexpected is actually this source of joy, as opposed to, I mean, I'm sure at some times it's a source of frustration for you, but
Yep. Like when everything's
also
focus. Yeah.
right, but also finding those little exciting things in there. That's a really cool factor.
Yeah, I like Lucy. Because I do a lot of sewing and knitting. There's not a whole lot of unexpected that's not purely my own ignorance or my own misunderstanding of things, which is another whole frustration level in and of itself. I started a new knitting pattern, read it completely wrong, had to rip out 15 rows, and was like, why am I like this? But
then you're like, why can't I just read it and be direct and like follow the instructions? Like, how hard is that?
Yeah. And so I want to ask myself, how hard is it to just read a pattern? Apparently it's pretty hard for me to pay attention to it. But no, the things that are the most unexpected for me is I do a lot of baking experiments. Because my partner is allergic to eggs. I've made it my personal mission in life to make every single baked good that I can without eggs so that he can experience them. Because I love bread in general, just anything bread or bread adjacent is my favorite food. So the fact that before we started dating, he'd never had cookies, he'd never had cake, he'd never had donuts, none of these things. So it kind of became a thing for me of like, I want to figure out how to do this. So I have several tried and true recipes that I've done really, really well. And then last summer, I usually do a lot of my baking in the fall and winter. I wanted to make cookies in the spring, like early summer, and it was a really hot, humid day. And for some reason, the cookies completely melted. I pulled them out of the oven and it was just a puddle of cookie dough on the pan. And I still have no idea why that happened. Like I did everything to the letter in the recipe correct. The only thing that I could figure out was like, maybe the dough was too warm and it just didn't hold its shape because the butter melted too much. So that I've had that happen a couple times where like the results don't turn out quite as I expected. And then I have to go back and tweak what I did. And that's always, most of the time those things turn out where we can still eat them. So they still taste good. They just don't fulfill my expectations of what it should have been. So
don't you also frequently just, come up with a challenge that, just use items you've never used before or things that you have sitting around? And that's, you never know what you're going to get when you put together some, creative projects with material you've never used before. That's a similar kind of thing, right?
Well, that's kind of like the getting creative with programs, because it's like you have a prompt and it's like, okay, I'm going to do this. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Yeah. And it's, it's fun stuff.
I think that's the other thing is, I feel like I'm getting old. And then this is another motivation I should bring up is that I had, some health problems this last year, and actually physically carrying my big telescope became a big deal. And I was like, what else can I do to appreciate and experience the night sky that isn't this big bulky telescope, setting it up and taking it down? And, really, it hadn't even really occurred to me that a camera really was like a telescope, and that if you open up the shutter, you see things you can't see with the naked eye. It's really that simple. But it also was a challenge because I knew I didn't have a great camera. I knew I didn't have great lenses. I knew I didn't have a tracking mount. I knew I didn't have knowledge. And so the challenge was, so what, just go see what you can do. And then, generally, if you can make that leap, you're suddenly way beyond where you even thought you would be. And then you start running. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
Really toss those rules, whatever rules might be out there, or that you're even making for yourself, right? And just, step aside.
That's a lot of what being creative is in making things. A lot of it is a leap of faith. Yep. You're taking this jump into something. You're pulling yourself totally outside of your comfort zone, jumping into something you've never done before, and just praying for the best to happen, or being ready for it to fail. It's something that I've watched some folks struggle with. Of they really, really want to do something, they jump in, it doesn't go the way that they anticipated it would, and then they get frustrated and walk away, which always makes me really sad, because I understand exactly why those frustration points would make somebody walk away. But at the same time, I have a voice in the back of my head of personal experience of I've had my best successes when I tried again and again and again and again until it works. So having that tenacity to stick with it, it's not intrinsic to everybody, and it is very hard to do. So if anybody's sticking to something, I always want to commend them of like, it's awesome that you stuck with it, because I know that you do hit a point where it's like, why am I doing this? I'm doing the same thing over and over again and not be hoping something different's going to happen, and nothing different has happened. So,
well, and there's that whole like,
you never know.
Crafting is therapeutic, but then sometimes your crafting makes you need the therapy.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes. Maybe
that's why we have so many different crafts that a lot of us do, because it's like, this craft is making me nuts. I'm going to go over here and do this.
Yeah.
But see, I don't have that problem because I have no skills or craft skills in any other, I really don't. I'm like, and I'm curious how you saw yourself, like, when did you see yourself as a crafter? How young of an age did you just identify with this? Because I've often thought like, that's a whole different breed of human being than me. I can't knit. I can't sew. I just can't do any of it. And I don't know if it's because I've never thought of myself that way and can't get beyond it, or if it's just, I don't know.
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, because I think what you're doing with, like, I think sometimes it's reframing what, like, the words we use for things, like crafting is a certain thing, and you attribute creativity to making those kind of tangible things. But I think like the photography that you're doing is definitely creative and providing you with a creative outlet. But I really like what you just said too about the fact that you're like turning your camera into a tool to see something that you can't see with the naked eye. So it's kind of like you're getting this double benefit of creating something, but then actually like literally finding a new way to look at it, which is really cool to me. I just think that's
the camera becomes
it's inspirational.
It's the camera almost becomes the paintbrush and the canvas.
Right.
It becomes both. And it's something that I find really interesting. If you go to like art fair or any art show, there's more photography than there is craft items, because it's come to fall under that art nomenclature much more than like the handcrafts and the handmade things that we do. So it's always been an interesting dichotomy of like how that happened, or like where those differentiations lie for different people and how it changes for us as a culture. But I don't know. I identified from making things with my hands from a very young age, because I remember my mom, when I was really little, as one effort to kind of keep me quiet when she wanted to work on things, handing me embroidery floss and a needle and a piece of denim and just being like, go crazy, or helping her with projects growing up, watching my aunt knit from a really young age. And then my dad, watching him make all of the bookshelves in our house, completely overhaul his barn and workspace and make all of his own storage stuff, taking apart cars and tractors and doing all this mechanical stuff with him. Even if I'm just sitting there watching, I feel like having an exposure to that at any age was what made me more comfortable for it, because it kind of took that unknown out of it, of like, I don't know how this works. I can't take it apart because it's too hard to learn on my own.
Right.
But I was lucky enough to have somebody there taking it apart and showing me how it works, and then putting it back together again. That gave me that confidence, and putting the tools in my hand and saying, you're going to use this screwdriver, or here's a drill, go for it. Here's a table saw, go for it. Like, I'll be here watching you. You're not going to hurt yourself, but like, you can do this. And that was, having somebody early on to say, you can do this, was really empowering. And that's why when I was teaching programs for people in person, was always saying, you can do this.
Right.
It may take you more time than it'll take other people, because building those fine motor skills for a lot of the things that we do, that Lucy and Heidi and I do, it takes time. But yes, you can do this. I know that you can. That's because it's so straightforward in some way.
Right. I think it's interesting to think about, because even though I just learned to do this recently, I know that part of my motivation and part of my interest and inspiration goes all the way back to my childhood too, because my dad was always looking through telescopes. And then the one place where I go to take photos up north is, I saw the Milky Way there for the first time on a long walk with my brother, and all of that stuff factors in and maybe helps you feel that you have a connection or a reason to do it, even if you don't quite have the skills yet.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly. And it's an easy path into anything, is to have a connection.
Yep.
And how you make that connection can look different for, anybody to have that connection point. But I think that's almost magical in a way of watching people have those connection points and then taking it from there. That's so cool to watch in other people.
Yeah. Teaching other people to do it is like a whole nother level of the same thrill.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, you definitely learn more things about it. And I'm just going to pop over and share a couple other things that I didn't get to of your photos that we have. But we can keep chatting. But I mean, it sounds like, having just having that exposure is really where it comes from for a lot of people. So
yeah,
exposure, no pun intended.
Yeah. It's very funny.
But anyways, so this was amazing. I was like, is something on fire? Like, it's just the color. It's like, what's going on here?
So
gorgeous.
Yeah. So let me explain this. So this is where our cottage is. So I've been going here for 50 plus years, and this is the first time I ever got to photograph this. So that was kind of thrilling.
Yeah.
That's Jupiter. The big white blob up there is Jupiter. So you can see that it got a little bloated, which is the thing. Bloated stars is a thing. I also didn't use a very high ISO, which is why there's not a bazillion stars. But I took a series of photos and I stacked them, and that really improves the signal to noise. So you get more, light, and you get less of what they call noise up in the sky. So the background isn't quite so noisy. And I didn't realize there was a storm going on, and that's where those clouds are. And I really didn't see those until I took the photo. I was like, oh,
see, that's interesting.
And then I saw lightning over there. And on another photo I took, there was lightning a little bit. But yeah.
I love that the stars are reflected in the water.
Mm-hmm.
That's spectacular. And I really, really like that a lot. I think that's cool.
Thanks. Now, what a lot of photographers would do, and this is really something you typically see, and I don't know how to do it yet, and I'm not even sure I want to do it, is you process the stuff, the stuff on the ground, the lights there, from the cabins, separate from the background sky, so that you can bring out more stuff in the background without lighting up. You can light up the sky and the Milky Way without further lighting up what's already kind of an overexposed foreground. And I don't know. I liked the colors. It was good enough for me. It looks like all those places are on fire, but
yeah. No, but that's kind of neat.
I think that's the neatest part is that combination of your eye is immediately drawn to the houses are on fire, and then it's momentary. It's like, no, they're not. And then it's the night sky, and then looking at it as, the reflection of the clouds on the lake, and then the reflection of the stars on the lake. And I think it's a really interesting picture. There's a lot more interest in this than some other normal landscape photography that I've seen or that I've done myself, because I'm a terrible photographer.
There's so many layers of existence to this too. Because I mean, you've just got like the directive, like humans, and then you've got like the planet and its weather, and then you've got the universe. And so it's just, I was really drawn into that.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
So I was showed this is another really lovely.
I love these kind of pictures. I have a really big soft spot for silhouettes over space backgrounds.
Kind of
I don't know why, but that's...
Sorry, it's like watercolor lettering, what we were supposed to try.
Oh my God.
Create this, yeah.
Now, that's Jupiter and Saturn there. Again, kind of bloated, but you can also see that the sky is a bit noisy. There's a lot of those pixely. That is because I couldn't layer it with multiple. And the reason I couldn't is because the trees were too close and my wide angle lens couldn't handle it. There was a lens problem, and it messed up the edges and made all the stars look weird. So I couldn't do the stacking thing. I probably could have if I'd known, if had taken hours and figured it out in Photoshop, but I just gave up. And this is a single shot rather than a stacked shot.
Okay. Wow.
And that the trees wrecked it in that way, but who cares? They framed it in a different way. And yeah. This is, by the way, this is right after I took this photo is when we heard that fox scream.
Oh,
This is in the Manistee National Forest. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that some picture came out to kind of immortalize that
Yeah.
fox.
I'll always remember this blood curdling scream right after this. Might have been the last thing anybody ever saw of me is this photo. This is what she disappeared.
There's a ghost hunting game that I watch because I don't play horror games, but that's one of the funny things is you can take pictures of the ghost, but if you die, one of your teammates has to pick the camera up in order to actually save the picture. So the joke of like the people that I watch play it is, you know, find my body, take the picture. This is what you need to remember me by. This photo of this ghost that I took. So.
yikes. Okay, so now this is like not astrophotography, but
wow.
yeah. So this just I saw this on Facebook one day and I was like, this is incredible and amazing and I love it. I swear you had another one that was like long, but maybe I just dreamt that instead. So I don't know, because I couldn't find anything else on your Facebook other than this one as far as a collage. And I keep calling it a quilt because for some reason to me it just makes me think of a quilt. So but,
I wish I could quilt. This is the best I can do.
yeah, I mean it's
impressive.
it's better than a quilt.
So
Really.
gorgeous.
So I just So how could you not say you're a creative or you're artistic? This is very crafty application.
You can't get this kind of definition of leaves on a quilt. I've tried.
Like, just assembling them like this, you know?
Yeah, you had to, there's intention, so.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we were up north and it was all the leaves were almost off the trees and they were starting to go, you know, they're kind of past their prime. And I don't know, made them as they're breaking down, it seemed to me that was kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Made them look, it's sort of sad. It's sort of interesting. I don't know. There's very veiny. There's kind of a human element with the veins. I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's very rich in color and I don't know. Yeah,
I'm really obsessed with fall colors and leaves. So this appeals to me of like, I pick up leaves everywhere. And that's grabbing the ones that look the most perfect, that are kind of like at their peak, but there is a beauty to the ones that are starting to decay. And there's that, you know, that they're past their peak, but they're still so colorful.
well, it's like revealing what's there without the, you know, once the chlorophyll can be, you know, move over chlorophyll.
Right.
Yeah.
That the green one was really interesting because it was an aspen leaf and all the other ones had turned yellow and this one just refused. And I just, in a way it doesn't fit. And in a way I was just, it's my favorite one. So I'm throwing it in there, even though it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That was the one in the very bottom right-hand corner. Reminds me that we went for a walk up by Traverwood this fall. And we always call them poison oak, but the low to the ground, really long skinny leaves that they kind of look like little umbrellas. Normally they turn like a red or a yellow in the fall. These ones turned that pale pink color, or maybe just a couple shades lighter than that. And I've never seen fall leaves turn pink. Like if I upped the saturation on my camera, it turned like the pink that was the second one in from the left on the top row.
Wow.
And it was just crazy to me that like I didn't think pink was a color that fall leaves turn to. So I ended up taking a ton of pictures because I was just fascinated by that.
Yeah.
How does that happen? So
yeah. But yeah, I think that I don't know, when you wrote your question in the email, you said something about like, when did you allow yourself to identify, you know, with being a crafter or an artist? And I really like that because I think that's what it is. It's just like allowing and deciding that, you know, you are. So, but now I want to skip to something else though. Because you said you identify more with being an amateur musician, and this is something I had no idea about. So do tell. What do you?
Oh, well, just that my whole life I've played music, and I was in a band with my brother, and so I was ready to accept that. Well, maybe I know a little bit about music, and I can call myself an amateur musician, but just visual artist or crafter, none of that was ever a thing I thought I ever identified with. And so when you asked me to be on the show, I'm like, what? That's not what but maybe you think of musicians as crafters too. I mean, they are in a way. So, yeah.
That was, I think we do get that question quite a bit of folks that we asked to be on the show, or like we've seen their work and we've loved it. And we, ask them, do you want to come on and talk about this stuff on the podcast? And we've had that question before of like, well, I'm not really crafty. Why would you want me to come and talk about this when it's not the same things that you do? But I think the three of us have always been really open to the fact of it's not just about crafting as what we would normally consider, like scrapbooking, woodworking, what have you, knitting, crochet. It's everything that we make as people, and the things that we create through different mediums, whether it's photography or a lot of the stuff that Toby does with woodworking that we had him on early in the show. And is your cat moving? I'm sorry.
There's always a cat.
I just saw this shark moving. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
That was very distracting.
Just need a Jaws theme.
Yeah. She's gonna come and eat you.
Well, I think one of the things you're getting at, I mean, is number one, labels aren't a great thing.
Yes.
Unless you choose to identify with them and just run with it. And then, what I think, I guess, how you identify and who you identify with and when you identify, I mean, they're clearly all individual things, but it's definitely getting to that point. That's really, the issue. And I guess I just never had a problem thinking, I'm a musician or close to it. But, I've often thought too, and this is maybe not very real, two things. I thought if to be a crafter, you have to make something useful. And I mean, is a photograph useful other than to hang on your wall or enjoy, what I mean? The useful or the, can use it in the real world kind of thing. That's always been a limitation I've had in terms of the definition, and maybe you don't. And that's the other good thing, is that, you're open-minded, and and the person who's making the distinction is the one that has the problem. You guys are open. You're willing to think of anything as a craft. Whereas I was walking around thinking, oh, this doesn't count. That doesn't count. This doesn't count. And that's not the way to do it.
I think that was where I was getting with we've always been really encouraging to break that stereotype and to open up that definition of, we want to talk about a bunch of different stuff. We want to bring in people that do different things than we do and get their perspective and see where the commonalities are, because that's the questions that you brought forward in your email to us, or the things that you brought up as possible topics, are all things that we've talked about. Process crafting versus product crafting, where your inspiration is, how you identify yourself as a crafter versus an artist, or at what point does that happen. So it really expands that experience of making and that experience of creating something. It makes it really clear to me that it's universal. It doesn't matter what the medium is. It's a human thing. And that, I think, is so much more cool than sticking things in a niche and saying, oh, this is a knitting podcast, or this is a craft. This is, just for these people. I love that pulling together and that embracing that commonality.
Yeah. Embracing rather than limiting. Right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my little soapbox.
I like that. So
It was
I like it.
nice. I was very well put. I liked it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks. So yeah.
I think that's a good end note actually at this point too.
Yeah,
So-
that's actually
Yeah,
a
no,
very
it's
nice
good.
encapsulation.
I know. I just kind of feel like I feel sated by what you said.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Amy, for agreeing to come onto the podcast.
Yeah, thank you
to
for
us
having me.
about your photography. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing more of your stuff on AADL TV or even just on social media or through the library at all, because I love it and I think it's
All
awesome.
right, thanks. I'll keep
Yeah.
doing it.
Definitely. And thank you everyone for watching with us today. We will see you in 2 weeks for our next episode. It'll be in 2021. It'll be in the new year. So we will have more content for you next year. In the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and don't forget to love each other.